How's it going, class? My name's Brock, and today I'm going to be discussing the topic of racial profiling, specifically racially profiling by the police. The reason I chose this topic is because I've always been really sensitive to the issue. That may come off as weird to you guys, being a white middle class kid, but it's always been something that's really bothered me. I growing up in Bakersfield, California, which is essentially Texas, super conservative, super Republican, which is fine. But the people there typically were racist, and it wasn't even a big issue. That was just the norm, and that always bothered me, especially because I always had friends who were Hispanic, Black, Asian. I don't just have white friends. White people bug me sometimes, but I always thought that why should we be profiling people of a different color if we're all the same? Especially if we're going to call this country the land of the free, then we need to be equal in that right. So in a research article titled "Racial Profiling: A Persistent Civil Rights Challenge in the 21st Century," R.A. Dunn discusses the traffic citations patterns in Cleveland and the metropolitan areas around Cleveland. And Brook Park specifically, which is a predominantly white neighborhood in around Cleveland, it was found that the officers, when they were pulling someone over and citing, they were either calling people white, or anybody else that wasn't white was labeled minority. Now, that may not seem like a big issue to you guys, but in this day and age, white people aren't even the majority in most places. And now in Brook Park, yes, but that doesn't excuse the fact that you can just belittle someone, or I guess assign a number or name to them. That really struck an issue with me, and I think that kind of shows what the general attitude towards racial profiling is in this day and age. So it's basically putting them in a box, and that kind of struck a chord with me. It really just takes away their identity. So he also found that in the Cleveland area, 79% of people pulled over for driving under suspicion were either Hispanic or Black. Only 15% in the entire Cleveland area, which is over 1 million people, were white. So basically, it concluded that Hispanic, Black, Asian, any other race other than white was 2 times more likely to be pulled over. And now that isn't representative of the country, but I think if we did more research on other cities and states, we'd find pretty close to the same amount. So another form of racial profiling that's been a really big problem is the stop and frisk program in New York City. This has been going on for a while. Giuliani put it in place, and really what it does is it allows the police officers to essentially just stop, search, and question anybody for any particular reason other, they don't even need a reason, just because they look suspicious. Now, it's supposed to be for everybody. It's supposed to be for every ethnicity. Now, let's look at some facts, because I feel like that's going to be skewed. So, in an article by Douglas Evans and Cynthia Williams titled "Stop, Question, and Frisk in New York City, a study of public opinions," they interviewed people of all ages and ethnicities. They had a team of interviewers on the streets going out and talking to people in the 5 different boroughs of New York City, and just trying to find out their general consensus on how they feel about the program. Now, it ranged from all ages, like I said, but the article also gives statistics from the New York Civil Liberties Union, which is taken into account the majority of citizens in New York City, and it was found that in 2011, 685,724 people were stopped just in 2011. Of that amount, 53% were Black and 34% were Hispanic. So if you add that together, only 9% of white people were stopped in 2011. Of those people stopped, 88% were 100% innocent, completely innocent, were let go. So as you can see, the program is extremely biased. Now, to me, that doesn't seem fair. The point of the stop and frisk program was to look for, originally, for people with weapons, but then that also brought in people looking for drugs and essentially just anything, really, and trying to find anything on anyone for the cops. So in addition to all these articles and whatnot, I experienced this firsthand. Not me personally, but my good friends have. And I mean, even back in Bakersfield, obviously it's not just Bakersfield. I mean, the entire state has racism. The entire country has racism. But excuse my dog, by the way. She does not shut up. But my sister, when I was about 15, I was like a sophomore in high school. She began dating this cool guy. His name was Nick. He was a black guy. Our neighbors, who we were really close with, nice people, but kind of white trash, you know. I remember the father went up and asked. He's like, "Okay, so are we gonna have to start locking our windows now?" And that maybe came off as a harmless joke, but I was 15, and I still was like, that's pretty fucked up, if you ask me. Like, why are you just gonna say that, especially to my sister, who just got a new boyfriend? She's happy about it, and then now you're going to project that racism. It was just ridiculous. And same thing happens I remember in high school. I went to a private Christian high school, not by my choosing. My parents made me go there. And I think there was about 4 black people in my class, and maybe 20 to 30 Hispanic people. So it was greatly skewed. It was white people, a lot of dairy, a lot of farming, a lot of people like that, and it was just crazy to me, the amount of racism that involved there. It was just a normal type thing basically for them, and it was anytime anything bad would happen, they would automatically assume that it was someone of black or Hispanic descent, and it's just a problem that needs to be stopped. So, in conclusion, the issue of racial profiling is rampant. It needs to be stopped, as I've said plenty of times. I've discussed the statistics in Cleveland. I also discussed the statistics in New York for personal examples and my personal examples. And if we don't put a stop to it soon, who knows what's going to happen? I mean, tensions are already high in America, especially with all the killings of unarmed black men. I mean, look at Trayvon Martin. Look at the people who look at the gentleman who was strangled to death by the cop, unarmed. And when this happens, there's extreme backlash. There's riots, there's protests, and the protests are completely justified. But then on top of that, when these protests happen, like, people are judging them for protesting because it just makes no sense. Like, they say that we have free speech, but when someone of black or Hispanic race is killed unarmed by police, we want to protest that. All of a sudden, we're rowdy, we're unruly, and we don't want justice. So it's just ridiculous to me. So, I mean, things we can do to put a stop to it is we can try and push Congress or push local and state authorities to be more accountable for these crimes. We need to implement a program or something that basically prevents this, or at least discourages racial profiling. Because as much as police say they don't, they definitely do. My coworker, who I interviewed for this project, he's black. Well, he's actually half black, half Mexican. He has never done a bad thing in his life. Ever since I've known him, he's wanted to be a police officer. He's studying criminal justice at Northridge, and he's always wanted to be a police officer. He's told me many, many times that he's been pulled over just because he was driving the speed limit. One time he said that he was driving, there was a car speeding next to him, it was a white guy. Cop doesn't even go after the white guy speeding, pulls over Louis because he has his, the reasons aren't known, but Louis had his hood on, and he assumes that's why. So my coworker Luis, he's pretty much desensitized to the subject, and he basically said to me, "Look, man, racial profiling is most likely always going to be going on, and when I become a police officer, all I can do is work to not do that." So, I mean, I think we need to educate people on this issue, and we also need to implement programs to stop the issue going on with current police officers. Right now, America is a ticking time bomb. Tensions are so high. History could repeat itself with wars happening. Who knows? It's a scary time. I think this is probably the worst I've seen racism in the current years. So I think police officers need to be accountable for their unjust practice, and we need to figure out some way to put a stop to this issue. Thanks for listening, guys, and hopefully you learned a little bit of something. But yeah, it was an honor to talk about this subject and research it because it really is a sensitive subject to me. Thanks, guys.